On the 6th of September, Queen Elizabeth II appointed Liz Truss as the new UK Prime Minister. It's been just over a month, as Truss could possibly be the shortest-serving Prime Minister of the UK, with some even doubting if she could last until Christmas. She's in the midst of severe backlash for the Conservative MPs. Reports say the senior Conservatives will hold talks on a rescue mission that could see the swift removal of Truss as a leader. Some of the senior Tory MPs are threatening to publicly call on Truss to stand down after the implosion of her tax-cutting programme and the subsequent sacking of her closest ideological ally and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. Her Go for Growth economic project has already been shredded by the hurriedly appointed new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. He was hastily given the job from an ideological ally. Truss has brought in someone who holds very different economic views from her own. He's from the party centre and she is on the extreme libertarian right. Now, the new Chancellor has promised to win back Britain's economic credibility by accounting for every penny of the government's tax and spending plans. But the doubts raised over Truss's leadership are so loud that even Hunt had to insist publicly that his boss, Prime Minister Truss, remained in overall charge.
Actions speak louder than words. The Prime Minister has changed her Chancellor. We are going to have a very big fiscal statement, a bit like a budget, in which we set out the tax and spending plans for several years ahead, and that's going to be independently verified by the Office for Budget Responsibility. We've been honest that it was a mistake not to do that in the mini-budget before.
After effectively dismantling Truss's gamble that tax cuts would spur increased growth and pay for public spending, Hunt has said that he will go further, including imposing tighter spending controls and some tax rises.
Mistakes. It was a mistake when we're going to be asking for difficult decisions across the board on tax and spending to cut the rate of tax paid by the very wealthiest. It was a mistake to fly blind and to do these forecasts without giving people the confidence of the Office for Budget Responsibility saying that the sums add up. And the Prime Minister's recognised that.
Hunt has appealed to Tory MPs to get behind Liz Truss as she battles to restore credibility with the backbenchers. While the economy is at the risk of going into recession, the governing Conservative Party is at risk of falling apart. Some of the Tories being unhappy with Truss brings back two leaders in the playing field. Rishi Sunak, former Chancellor and Truss's opponent in the leadership race, and Penny Mordaunt, the third-place finisher. As per YouGov poll reports, 62% of voters who participated in the last election and chose Liz Truss as the PM believe that they made the wrong decision, while only 16% believe that they chose the right candidate. Now, for more on this, we are being joined live by Nicholas Nugent, who is a journalist and former BBC editor. Thank you for being with us, Nicholas. Let's jump right in. Liz Truss has been in charge for just over a month. We have already seen her make a couple of major U-turns on her economic policy, and she has sacked her ally Kwasi Kwarteng. And now the senior Tories are already discussing her possible ouster. What are your views?
Well, as you rightly say, Liz Truss is currently in charge, but the question is she also in power? Because there is a view that after the sacking of her Chancellor and the appointment of a new one, that effectively the new one is more powerful than the Prime Minister. In other words, Jeremy Hunt is the one who is making the moves now. So big question mark over Liz Truss's future indeed. She's nominally Prime Minister, but she's really beholden to her Chancellor, who we expect within days, if not within hours, to be back-treading even more on the Prime Minister's previous economic philosophy. A lot will hang on when the markets open tomorrow. That's roughly 17 hours from now. If we see that bond prices continue to rise, it will call for very urgent action, and we'll all be waiting to see whether Jeremy Hunt takes that urgent action, or indeed whether he makes moves before the markets open. So, the question at the moment, who is in power? If it's not the Prime Minister, is it the Chancellor? And if it's not the Chancellor, is it the markets? And do we like to be controlled by the markets? But as the Chancellor said on television this morning, the markets are in fact the creditors. They're the ones who are lending money to the government. And the government's decision to borrow even more is what caused the crisis. So we have a sort of three-way network there, and we're really very, very uncertain who will prevail, and indeed, as you're indicating, whether the Prime Minister can survive.
Right. And if it comes to that, Nicholas, who would be likely to replace Liz Truss as the next leader? Would it be Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt?
Well, I noticed you named those two. There are at least two other names being bandied around. I mean, a fairly obvious one is that Jeremy Hunt himself would become Prime Minister. He was, after all, a candidate at the earlier stage in the election. The fourth name is Boris Johnson, but I think, frankly, that is a very outside possibility. But I think you should consider the three. That's Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Hunt. And the question here is, how would a transfer take place? Because nobody has the patience, or indeed the market doesn't have the patience, to wait another 3 months to go through the same process again. So what is expected is that Conservative MPs themselves, who you may remember, they favoured Rishi Sunak, that they will take the move. And the question now is whether enough of them can coalesce around one figure, such as Rishi Sunak, but it could equally be Jeremy Hunt or Penny Mordaunt. The question now is whether enough of them can coalesce around one person. And if they can, then the transfer of power will be effected by members of Parliament rather than by members of the party at large. You can see there are a lot of open questions at the moment. The only thing I'll put my hand on my heart and say with some certainty is that Liz Truss's days are numbered. But whether we're talking about days or weeks or months, it's difficult to say. She is unlikely to be able to survive. So we're waiting for the markets tomorrow, and after the markets open, we're waiting to see whether Tory MPs, Conservative MPs, can agree enough to be able to make the next transfer happen reasonably swiftly.
Right. We'll leave it there, Nicholas, and wait and see. Thank you very much for your valued insights there.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.